Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for this inspiring panel and the great introduction. As we've heard, being equitable is important, and the cost of living is an impediment to being equitable. Most of life will take place in cities in the 22nd century. And the question is, how do we make these cities livable? How do we make them equitable? How do we make sure everybody can afford to live in them? Old, young, privileged, not so privileged. So I have a great panel here who come at it from different viewpoints. I have Mr. Stephen John Thomas, who is the COO of the King Abdullah Financial District in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Then I have Dr. Ruth Shapiro, who is the co-founder and CEO for Asian Philanthropy and Society. And I have Mr. Jerry Lee, who is founder and managing partner of EWTP Arabia Capital. I think nobody brings more fintech and high-tech to the kingdom than you do, which is really very impressive. But let me start with Stephen. You have a great opportunity because CAFT was sort of created from scratch, so you could really shape it. And it's a place of work, it's a place of life. How do you make sure that it is, livable, both in terms of socially livable, but also environmentally livable? I think in terms of commutes, in terms of how you power your big, tall buildings. Actually, I would encourage everybody to go and see CAFT. It's quite something to see. So over to you, Jerry. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Cornelia. CAFT, it's all about your town planning and your operations. To give you a feel for CAFT, King Abdullah Finance District, it's 1.6 kilometres square metres in the area where it's situated. There's 95 buildings. So we've got an opportunity there with the town planning to consider the environment, to consider livability. So one of the design done by the architects was we have all the buildings surrounded by a wadi. The wadi itself is below ground level, which means the temperature within the wadi is 8 to 10 degrees below street level within Riyadh. There's other things you can do with the design regarding the grey water systems, regarding all the power systems you install, the technology, and then operations. There's so many things you can do with operations, like with smart city platforms now, and we're certainly putting in one with a company called Orange, and with BMS systems where you can control your energy usage, you can monitor it and control it. There's lots of other things that we're doing regarding reducing the environment, reducing the carbon footprint there at a time. Also, as far as livability, CAFT has 5 asset classes, all within 10 minutes. We're aiming to be a 10-minute city. So you've got home, you've got work, you've got recreation, you've got entertainment, you've got your retail, all within a 10-minute walk.
So this is very much like what we will see in the line at some stage. Now, Ruth, you are really, you know more about philanthropy than most people know about philanthropy. And cost of living is an issue for many people. And as these cities will grow bigger and more people will move to them, cost of living will be an issue for even more people. So what can philanthropy do to sort of alleviate it, to make sure these cities become more equitable, more livable places?
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here up on the stage again. Saudi Arabia is lucky it gets to build all these new cities from scratch. In this part of the world, I think only Indonesia is endeavoring to do that, only by moving the capital to Borneo. We'll see how that works out. But most of us have to live in the cities, or want to live, or are living in the cities that are already built. We know that income disparity is a huge problem all over the world. In fact, it's so much more the statistics are so much more stark than during the Gilded Age, which of course resulted in the Great Depression and then World War II. So, you know, we need to solve for everyone. So what does that mean when you're talking about inclusivity? You have to think about the vulnerable population, and the vulnerable population isn't the same. So in East Asia, particularly Hong Kong, the eastern part or the urbanized part of China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the vulnerable are the elderly. Because they are left out, and it's a growing demographic. In China, by 2040, a third of the population will be over 60. Whereas in the South, India and Indonesia and those countries, it's the youth that are growing. And many of these youth are facing a world where they don't have adequate skills. So when you think about the role of philanthropy, it's not a one-size-fits-all at all. Where there's elderly, you need to help them be still included in community life, to have conversations, to meet people, to have meals together. And there's a lot of philanthropic capital going to that. And let me just, I'm running out of time, I think, but let me just give you one example that I like. There's a very big real estate developer, one of the ones that's still solvent in China, Liu Daoming, and he takes his philanthropy, so he creates big residential communities, and he takes his philanthropy to develop places where the elderly can play mahjong, can meet together, can talk together, can get subsidized meals. That's using his philanthropy and CSR. What it does, however, though, is make his residential communities much more attractive for the elderly, because why wouldn't you go to a place where there's quality of life instead of just four walls? So that's a good example. And in the South, a lot of it is philanthropy is being used for skilling and job growth to help those young people be part of the community.
That's very true. It's the weak are different wherever in different parts of the world. And I'm coming to Cherry because you're the man of technology here. Tell us, will technology help us alleviate the cost of living, or will things become more expensive because we have to get all these apps and buy all these devices? So how can technology help alleviate sort of cost of living pressures?
Yeah. We deeply believe technology is the most important element can be a force, can shape the future. Actually, nowadays, everybody knows that data is a new oil. Technology innovation is a renewable, and especially the AI is the future. And how could we utilize a lot of product, service, and mature capabilities to support and establish the new oil in Saudi Arabia. This is what we are doing and what we are thinking about. This is what we are doing in the last 5 years. Yeah. And by the way, we are also a member company. Our building is also in CAF. We thank Steve Jobs, and we bring more than hundreds of Chinese top companies to Saudi Arabia. And through 5 years ago, we cooperated with PIF, set up our first fund, and last year we set up our second fund. And through the fund, we successfully migrate 20 plus giant company, and also, through the companies, through the they provide high technology to bigly boom and support the local living and the local family to using more efficiency service and product. Just like I give you a very quick example. We align with Alibaba and STC, launch the first cloud computing service in this region.
But how does it help alleviate the cost of living?
This is a very good question. Actually, from the efficiency perspective, of course, cloud computing can significantly reduce the cost and can easily provide different kind of service, entertainment.
To make it more available.
Yes.
To everybody.
Yes.
This is great, because this brings me back to Stephen B. Because when we had a conversation going into this, you said, "Oh well, I don't really like to talk about cost of living. I like to talk about quality of life." Could you elaborate?
I think to make cost of living meaningful, you need to consider life experiences. So quality of life is critical, and it's very much interrelated with that. As we're getting more urbanised, the world over time is becoming a lot more urbanised, and global cities need to adopt, and they are adopting this, what they call placemaking, live, work and play. So we believe to get the best quality of life, you've got to have everything in one small area. So that's something that we've done well. In Capital, I know lots of global cities have done that, where you're living in a high quality accommodation, you're working, there's a good business ecosystem in place, and you've got everything available to you in short periods of time. So that promotes a good quality of life, rather than you having to travel all the time, long distances, you're very close to home.
So essentially, we're coming back. You're turning the city into a village experience, because that's where everything is close, right? And you still know each other, which also is quality of life, that you know your neighbors and you know each other. But we're coming from, CAFT is for the reasonably affluent people. We're coming back to the less affluent people, and we're coming back to Ruth. I was very struck when you started talking about the weakest link. Can you explain how, in a cost of living city context, we need to take care of the weakest link in society, and why we need to do that?
Thank you very much, Cordelia. But first, I want to just build on Jerry's example. I think many of us in this room will have heard about Reliance Corporation in India, and they have a phone and a communications plan called Jio, which has significantly dropped the price, where everyone in India has a phone and a plan because it's so cheap. They didn't do it for philanthropic purposes. In fact, they wiped out the competition as a result of this plan. But everyone there has a phone and a plan. So it doesn't only have to be philanthropy. But let me give you an example philanthropically. During COVID, Singapore was patting itself on the back saying, "We've got this, we've got it all covered." And all of a sudden, there was a major flare-up in Singapore. And where was that? It was among the immigrant population, who they had overlooked. This is a case of you're only as strong as your weakest link. So what happened? Singapore had to close down. They went to all the nonprofit organizations who said, because they didn't have connectivity to that population. So they used the nonprofits to reach that immigrant population, inoculate them, and bring their economy back.
So thank you very much. We've learned a lot. I mean, we've learned how technology can help make life more affordable, be an integrator. We've learned how having the big city as a village experience, if I may put it very simply. And we've learned about how philanthropy is important and how we must take care of the weakest link to make our cities more livable. Could you please give this great panel a great round of applause?
Thank you.